Good morning. It's good to see you today. Special welcome to those of you who are joining us online. We're glad that you could join us through this medium. I'm not sure about you, but sometimes it feels like maybe advertisers are not always honest with us. Have you ever sensed that? That maybe you saw something online and purchased it and realized, I didn't quite get what I thought I was getting. And usually it's not that I got more, it's usually that you got less or something completely different. A number of years ago, I was traveling to California for a conference, and so I had to book a hotel room. Now, when I travel by myself, only one variable matters when I book a hotel room, and that's price. And so I found a hotel room that was $45, and I said, excellent, I'm going to pick this one. Now, when I travel with my wife or with our kids, I think there's a few other variables that go into that equation, running water, a few other things. But in this case, I thought I'd found the perfect of both worlds. I found a really cheap price, and the pictures of this hotel looked really fantastic, and so I booked it. I flew all day, all the way across the country, finally got to the rental car, drove up to the hotel. It was dark, but I looked at the building and I thought, no, this isn't the right place. It doesn't look like the pictures online. So I went in to check. There was a person working at the cash, and they were behind a thick plexiglass wall. This is pre-COVID. Thick plexiglass wall, and I asked them, and sure enough, I was in the right hotel. So they gave me my key and sent me to my room. I opened the door to my hotel room, and it had a smell to it. A little bit of mold, a little bit of cigar smoke, and a whole lot of cleaner. You know this smell? This was maybe a little BO thrown in there too. So this is the room, and then I put my suitcase down and I looked on the bedspread, and I noticed that there was dried candle wax all over the bedspread. And I thought to myself, it's only $45. This is good. I can live with this. But sometimes things are not always as they seem. Today we're going to start working through the book of Ecclesiastes. It's this really fascinating book in the Old Testament. And if the book of Ecclesiastes were a person, it would kind of be the person in your small group that when you hear them speak, you can't tell if they're really, really spiritual or if they're a heretic. You can't really tell because of just the way in which they address certain things. They also come across as a bit of like a contrarian, like, they would wake up today and you'd say, oh, isn't it great? The sun is shining. And they'd say, yeah, but it's cold out. This was kind of the personality. But it's also controversial. This book actually, when they were putting the books of the Bible together, there were some that did not even think this book should be in the Bible because it does not mention God very often. And when it doesn't always come across as very theological, and the advice that it gives is a little bit unconventional. I mean, where else, as you'll see today, can you find a verse that says, eat, drink, and be merry? This is the purpose of life. But there's something about this book that is fascinating, that makes us work a little bit to find the meaning. And sometimes what the author is saying isn't exactly the thing we need to pay attention to most. Sometimes it's the thing that the author is not saying, that he's hinting something to us a little bit beneath the surface. So let's jump in. We're going to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1. I invite you to follow along if you'd like. It's on page 1034. In case, like me, you couldn't find the book of Ecclesiastes quickly in the Bible. 1034, or look it up electronically. I'll read the first 11 verses for us. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. What does man gain from all his labor, at which he toils under the sun? Generations come, generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets. It hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south. It turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, the St. John River and the Kennebecasis River. Yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome. More than one can say, the eye has never enough seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was already here long ago. It was here before our time. There is no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are not yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. Happy Sunday. It's good to have you here today. What's so fascinating to me as I read through this first few verses of chapter 1 is that the people in this day are like you and I today. We're chasing after things. We're so easily allured, so easily tempted, so easily kind of distracted by things that we think if we chase after these things, they will bring meaning to life. The next adventure, the next hit, the next height, the next thrill. But truly, nothing is ever new. Life is monotonous. Life is predictable. That's what these first few verses are hinting at. Think of your life as a kid. You get up in the morning, you eat a bowl of cereal, you go to school, you come home, you have supper, you play video games, and then you go to bed. And it's monotonous and predictable. And you just cannot wait to be an adult. You can get a job and just get up in the morning and eat cereal and go to work and come home and have supper and then spend a few hours playing video games so that you can go to bed and do it all over again. Life has this repetitious feel. But it's not just us, it's the sun and it's the ocean, he says. Look, if you have company coming from far away and you want to take them to New River Beach at low tide in August, you can go online and figure out the best day to do so. Do you know why? Because the ocean is repetitious. It does the same thing. We all enjoyed the eclipse a few weeks ago. If you want to chase the next eclipse or wait for the next eclipse that might be here, you can go and figure out when that will be because the sun is predictable. It does the same thing again and again. And you and I are also so easily distracted by things are new. You know, it struck me the other day, we have a basket on top of our fridge. And in this basket are old cell phones. Cell phones, like I've got an iPhone 5 in there, a couple of iPhone 6s. I think I've got an iPhone 7, maybe an 8. And they're just sitting in this basket gaining dust. Some of them are chipped and banged up. A few of them might not have screens that work. But it struck me the other day that in an iPhone 8, there's more technology than in the first space shuttle that took man to the moon. Think about that for a second. There's more technology sitting in a basket on my refrigerator gathering dust than first launched a human being into outer space. And when those things come out, there's such excitement about it because it's new. And we wait in line and we spend big money to get the new thing. And we chase after the new thing. And then before you know it, it's in a basket gaining dust on top of our fridge. There is nothing new under the sun. Nothing stays new. And it says here, too, that as we chase after these new things, we never get filled up. It talks about our eyes never see enough. You've never probably said, you know what? I think we should just get rid of all of our streaming platforms because I think I've seen enough. I've watched enough things. No. And you're going to go home today and you're going to scroll through reels on your phone for an hour and you will probably not get to the point and say, I think I've just seen enough. I'm good. I've just completely satisfied and complete. We're always chasing, always looking, always searching, always pursuing. And the writer in Ecclesiastes is going to give a wake-up call to us. The metaphor that kind of comes to my mind is someone is walking, we're all just kind of walking in a line, going through life, just kind of trudging along in our days. All of us, we're just kind of moving in the same direction. And the writer of Ecclesiastes comes along, kind of like Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld, and gives us a big shove and says, wake up! What are you doing? Why are you in this routine? Why do you do the same thing every day? Why are you just kind of stuck in this motion doing what everybody else is doing? Are you alive? Are you living? Do you know the meaning of life? Ecclesiastes kind of does this wake-up call, jarring us, knocking us off balance, trying to get our attention, trying to get us to ask some questions about what life is really all about. And it works. As you read through the book, you're going to have to stop at points and put it down and say, whoa, I got to think about this. This is kind of catching me a little bit off guard. And to kind of get our attention, he uses two phrases throughout the book. One of them is chasing after the wind. How many of you have lost shingles or trees in your property from the windstorms this winter? Right? The wind is so powerful. And when it's blowing out there, none of you think, you know what? I think I'm going to go outside and run after it and grab a hold of it and hang on to it. You don't do that. It's impossible. The other phrase that's used here again is the phrase meaningless. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. It comes from a Hebrew phrase that doesn't translate very well into English. Pastor Sandy has done some work on this phrase and kind of gave us a metaphor that really translates really well, kind of helps us capture its meaning. And it's the idea of a mirage. Now, if you're on a summer sunny day and you're looking out on down the road and you see it and you look in the distance, you will see on the road what looks like water. Water spilling over the road into the ditch. Clear water. Refreshing looking water. And we know it's an optical illusion. But if you didn't know that and you were kind of sitting in your car, maybe you have your dog with you, you think, look, we're going to travel up ahead, we're just going to make some good time, we're going to get up there, we'll all get out, and the dog will get some drink of the water, and maybe there's a fountain there too, and we're going to fill up our water bottles, and we're just going to be so refreshed. And so you do it. You drive, you speed, you burn up time, you burn up gas, and you get there. And you pop open the doors of the car and you jump out and you stare down at the ground. And what do you see? Hot, dry asphalt. Nothing. And you realized you've been duped. You've been humiliated. You've been made a fool of. Because from a distance, what looked so real, and what you got thinking about and dreaming about and were just like, oh, I can't wait to get there. When I get there and when I get that, I'm going to be living. I am going to be so satisfied, my soul will be quenched. And yet you get there and you realize it was vapor. It was mist. It was a mirage. Now, the first 2 chapters in Ecclesiastes kind of captures 3 different quests, 3 different mirages that you and I all can easily kind of be distracted by or be pursuing after. And the first one is wisdom. Let me read from you chapter 1, verses 12 to 18. I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I devoted myself to study and explore by wisdom all that is done under heaven. What a heavy burden God has laid on us. What a powerful statement that is. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless. A chasing after the wind. What is twisted cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I thought to myself, look, I've grown and increased in wisdom more than anyone who's ruled in Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too was chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow, and the more knowledge, the more grief. You know, we live in such an interesting time. There's so much change going on all around us. Technology is changing, AI, computers, the impact of cell phones, the impact on mental health. Things are going on globally and internationally, wars and conflicts, redefining social policies and social norms. Look, we cannot all help but just stop and say, I need to make sense of this. I need to figure out what is going on right now in this world. It's natural to do so, and so we try, we read, we get blogs, we have podcasts, we read the scriptures. Maybe there's other texts that we read because we're just so desperate to try to make sense of what is going on in this day that we live in. I mean, the writer says that's a powerful line. What a heavy burden that is, to try to figure out all that is going on in this time. And we can look off to the distance and think, well, if I read this or if I get this information or if I finally understand that, then I'll be able to make sense of it all. What a relief that will be. And I've done it, and maybe you have too. And you get to that point, and then something else happens that blows your categories apart and makes it all just fall to pieces. What a heavy burden. I think of people who are drawn to conspiracy theories. And look, I get it. And one part of me says, I get how I could just take this system. I might not even believe really that it's true, but it's something. And I can't make sense of it all, so I'd rather have something than have nothing. And maybe you know people too. They spend so much time. They're on Facebook. They've got a Facebook page. They're listening to podcasts. They're reading books. And they have this sincere desire to just try and make some sense of what is going on in this life. And they take a little bit of this and a little bit of a TV personality and something from the Bible or another spiritual text and a blog that they've seen and a podcast they listen to, and they cobble it together in this little system to try to make sense of life. And oftentimes it's about as effective as saying, you know what, I'm going to pick all of my favorite diets and try them at the same time. I'm going to be on the ketogenic, vegan, intermittent fasting, grapefruit diet. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We come to our own end discouraged and frustrated. Now, the book of Ecclesiastes is not trying to depress us, even though it may feel that way. It's not trying to discourage us, because hope is just beneath the surface. It's a little bit off screen, so to speak. It's kind of saying to us, if these aren't the things that will satisfy us, then what will? If not this, then what? Well, let's go to the next mirage that he says you and I are all likely to fall into in chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. And this is the mirage of pleasure. Let me just read you these verses. I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless, a mirage. Laughter, I said, is foolish. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone else in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces, and acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Now, I'm guessing if you have someone in your life who's not a person of faith, and you said to them, write out a list of the things that if you do them, and if you have them, you'll be happy. I'm guessing that their list and this list would be pretty close. There'd be a lot of similarities on it. He talks about laughter, foolishness, joking, goofing around, being irresponsible, making yourself happy with wine, get the buzz that never ends all weekend long, having properties and building projects and manicuring them and making them perfect and making sure they're on Instagram so all your neighbors will envy you. And amassing financial wealth so that when you get up in the morning and you open your bank account app and your investment app, that number just keeps ticking upwards. And filling your garage with toys and cars and things and new parcels arriving every day from Amazon, and then trying to fill that inner ache with sexual pleasure. I refused my heart nothing. If my body wanted to do it, I did it. This is his message, leaving us to ask the question, did it work? Are you satisfied? Did the void inside of your life, is it now perfectly filled? I mean, you've got all the things. Was the water down the road that was kind of shimmering from a distance and calling your name when you got there and opened the door and got out, was it refreshing? Is your thirst satisfied? Well, look at verse 11. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. you ever been tempted in this way? This is going to be fun. This is going to be great. This is going to give me the thrill. This is going to take me somewhere. This is going to be the thing that's going to just change my life, and I will just be so happy forever and ever and ever. Only to get there and realize it was a mirage the whole time. The great theologian Jim Carrey said this: I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see that it's not the answer. If you're tempted to be chasing after these things, read the reviews from the writer of Ecclesiastes. It's a waste of your time. It's meaningless. It will not give you what you think it's going to give you. One more thing. One more mirage that we're all tempted to chase after. So if wisdom and philosophy will not satisfy, and if pleasure will not satisfy, then surely our careers will, right? Working hard, making a name for ourselves, becoming successful, climbing the corporate ladder, surely that is going to do it. That's going to be the thing that will finally give me inner peace. Let's read chapter 2, verses 17 to 23. So I hated life. The work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool. Yet he will have control over all my work into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This, too, is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a man may do his work with wisdom and knowledge and skill, and then he must leave what he owns to someone who's not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all his toil and anxious striving with which he labors under the sun? All his days his work is pain and grief, and at night his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. So if you're in the middle of your career right now or just getting started, let me give you 3 cheery thoughts from these verses. Number 1, you're going to work really hard, you're going to do great things, and then you're going to be too old to enjoy them. That's what he's saying. You're going to finally retire and you're going to want to travel, and your insurance agent is going to say, we're not giving you any insurance. It's $1 million a day just to step into the province or to the state of Maine for 1 hour. There's no chance. You're too old. The window for you to enjoy your retirement has closed. There, number 1. Number 2, you've worked your whole life. You've accumulated some things, but you shouldn't give it to your children. Sorry, children, if you're here today. Because they didn't work for it. They don't appreciate how hard you've worked. And which one are you going to give it to? All of them equally? This is the Logan Roy question from Succession, right? Am I going to take all that I've built with my hands and just give it to my kids? What if they're foolish? What if they make a mess of it? What if they waste it? Or third, I've worked so hard in my career, and the summation is it's just added stress and anxiety to my life. More money has meant more problems. Having more stuff has meant to manage more things, which has only created more problems. The idea that if I look down the road and see that shimmering water on the horizon and think, if I make it in my career, if I get that promotion, if I climb the corporate ladder, if I get my name on the wall or whatever it might be, then I'll be happy. He says, it's a mirage. And it will not give you what you think it's going to give you. 3 pursuits: wisdom, trying to make sense of things; pleasure, and our work. They turn up empty, leaving us to ask this question: if not those things, then what? If it's not this, then what is it that will ultimately satisfy? Let's just set that question aside, because we're going to deal with it in the weeks to come. But I want to kind of circle back to all of these things: wisdom, all of the things that you have and the people that you have in your life and your work, and how do we hold them? Let's read verse 24 for a second, chapter 2. All man can do, nothing better than to eat, drink, and find satisfaction in his work. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. Now, if I go to your house today and you're unloading your dishwasher and I decide to be helpful and jump up and start taking cups out of the dishwasher, I'm going to put them in the places I think they should go. I'm going to put them in the wrong cupboards, and you're going to just smile because you're polite. And then as soon as I leave, you're going to put everything in its rightful place. Friends, so much of life is learning how to put things in their rightful place. Learning the lesson of where does my work go in my life? Where does my family go? Where does these desires that I have go? How do I deal with them? What space do they take up in my life? God gives us friends and family and food and vacations and walks on the beach and work and colleagues and a physical body and spouses, and all of these are gifts. And that is their place. But the human temptation from the beginning of time to the time when this book was written to now is to replace God with the gifts that God gives. The temptation of my heart is to replace God with the gifts that He gives me, to take these gifts that He gives to me and try to make them eternal and ultimate things that will ultimately satisfy my soul, and take the place that solely belongs and is reserved for the Lord. Most of these things are good. Many of them are good, but they were never meant to occupy the throne of our hearts. And when we try to extract ultimate, eternal meaning from these gifts that God gives us for life, we will always end up disappointed because none of them can fill that space. They were never created to. When you keep expecting them to fill this void, you can ruin them as well. Your spouse, your kids, your job, your vacation, your friends, how you look cannot sustain the weight of the questions that your heart and soul are asking. A number of years ago, there was a couple that were going through some marriage problems, and they said, you know what, we're going to go to Florida and get some sun and some sand and some warm weather, and this is going to just fix our marriage. And I remember thinking to myself, that's a lot of pressure to put on sand. That's a lot of pressure to put on sun. That's a lot of pressure to put on Florida. The writer is coming along to us as we're just kind of trudging through life and gives us a shove and says, wake up. So many of the things that you are pursuing and think will make you happy are gifts that God has given to you to enjoy each and every day. And you should let your kids be your kids and your spouse be your spouse and your job be your job and your money be your money, and remove the expectation that these things will give you ultimate joy and meaning. Maybe just one more analogy to help. A number of years ago in the 80s, there was a wonderful movie that came out called Chariots of Fire. You can look it up for you younger peoples. It told the story of two British runners running in the 1924 Summer Olympics. They were both competing in the 100-meter dash. And there were two runners who were looking at this race through very different perspectives. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Harold Abrams. And as he was kind of awaiting his turn to go out and race, he said this, "And now, in 1 hour's time, I will get out there again. I will raise my eyes and look down that corridor 4 feet wide with 10 lonely seconds to justify my existence." That's a lot of pressure to put on a race. And so easy for each and every one of us to look at something and say, this thing is going to justify my existence. In contrast, his partner in crime, Eric Liddell, who was running the same race, wrote this. He said, "I believe God made me for a purpose, but He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure." Running is a gift. And He does it as a gift. So let's go back to this image of a mirage for a second. Maybe today this book of Ecclesiastes is going to be the shove that you need to say, wake up. You're chasing after something that's never going to give you what you want. And better to learn now than when you get there. 10 years later, 20 years later, tens of thousands of dollars later, all kinds of things later. Better to get that wake-up call now. So I pray that your heart would be open to receive the message of this book. Maybe you know people who are on that pace. Maybe you have kids, family members, friends, coworkers, and you just see the shimmering water ahead and they just are pursuing it with everything they have. And they need someone to come alongside them and help them see, look, those things are important, but they're never going to give you what your heart is ultimately looking for. Or maybe you're like the writer of Ecclesiastes and you said, I pursued it. I chased it. And I got there and I opened the door and I got out and I stood there burning my feet on the hot, dry pavement. And I've learned my lesson. And I'm in a search now to say, God, what is it that's going to be take that rightful place on the throne of my heart? That's what we're going to talk about next week. Let me pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you for words of wisdom that we can learn and benefit from today. And Lord, may our heart and hands be open. If what we need today is someone just to shove us a little and wake us up and say, hey, 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 that's not going to end like you think it is. You're not going to end up where you think you're going to end up. And God, may there be mercy in that, even as difficult as it may be. And maybe for some of us today, we've already gotten there and we're struggling with what's next. May we hear the hopefulness of this book, that if not those things, then what? And that we would have open arms and open hearts to hear what you have to say to us. God, we thank you that you have created us for our souls and our hearts to be satisfied, and that you invite us to seek and knock and ask, and that you will lead us as we do.